It's time for this week's tutorials, and before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge just how difficult this week has been. I think as a company, it's been really tough to think about carrying on with business as usual when we're really using this week to amplify Black voices and to donate our resources. And fact of the matter, things are not business as usual. As a team, we got together and we reminded ourselves of how many marginalized communities we have as part of the Become Project. And we think that it's really important to still continue on with tutorials, make sure that we are giving you what you need to ensure that your body is safe and that you understand the movements that are going on. And we realize that the routines at the Become Project can be a really, really incredible release and a time to recenter. And we hope that for those of you who are choosing to do Become this week, that you're able to find that within us and that you're able to recharge so you can go out and fight the good fight. So without further ado, we're going to be talking about the leg series this week, and particularly how to make the leg series more comfortable for your hips. Let's do it. So anytime I teach this position laying on the side, one of the most common questions that comes through is how do I feel it more up here and not just in the supporting hip? So what tends to happen is that hip bone will end up driving down into the floor, and it creates a really uncomfortable feeling in the side of the leg. Now, I wish that I could tell you that there's just one little thing that you can do different in order to make this pain go away. But really, it's going to be up to the individual. So everybody's body is going to respond differently in this one. I'm going to give you a couple of tips of things that I can help, but overall, the number one thing that you have to do is work to adjust your body, to kind of wiggle your body, roll out of that uncomfortable position until you get to a more fleshy part of your butt. Okay, tip number one is to adjust, all right? So once you get down into that position, if the hip bone is directly on the floor, I encourage you to try moving your body in some different ways. So something you may do is either move your base foot forward or move your base foot in, as well as having the knee in line with the hip or sliding the knee a little bit down. The next place that you can adjust is actually rolling a little bit forward on the body or rolling a little bit backwards on the body, and your third adjustment comes in the elbow. Now again, there's not one right or wrong way that I can tell you to move here because it's different for every single person. But once you get here, see if you can adjust your body some. So, there it is. So it's not just that hip bone that's driving down. I tend to like to scoot backwards on my body a little bit. So this is me being forward. Here I am shifting slightly backwards to get more along the fleshy part of the butt. Play with it once you get into this position and see what feels best for you. Tip number two is probably the most helpful of all of these tips that I'm going to give you today. So tip number two is about redirecting your body weight. So anytime we get on the floor, the natural tendency of the body is to let the weight sink down. At this moment, I am sinking both into my shoulder and into my rib and into my hip. All of my body weight is being directed down, which is causing that hip bone to drive even more into the floor. So what I want to do is think about lifting up and away from the floor. Do you see what move this is similar to? A side plank, correct? See that? So you want to think about utilizing your lat, your oblique, the elbow pushing up and away from the floor so that the body weight is a little more light on this hip. Tip number three is to give yourself some support. So here I've taken a towel and I've folded it. I'm going to put my hip on that towel and then I'm going to set up in position. If you have a really bony hip or maybe you're like, I just cannot adjust here, this should definitely help and it won't change the move at all. In fact, weirdly, it may make the move a little bit better because you're slightly elevated off the floor, which gives you a little bit more space in the oblique and the leg and the neck. So this is going to be a really good option. I want to show you that I did fold the towel fairly thick, which gave me that extra lift off of the floor. Tip number 4 is to change the position of the actual exercise. So instead of being propped up on the elbow, which ends up meaning that the hip has more tendency to drive down, you could also do this exercise here with your arm being created as a pillow. Some people still feel that hip driving down, but technically speaking, this one should offer a little bit less pressure on the hip and a little bit more room to find the outer thigh and the glutes. I want to remind everyone that this series is a very thought-provoking series. So I would say it's more about the mental connection with the body than it is at all about doing big motions. Now, I discussed this quite a bit in the video, but let's just touch on it one more time here. So when you are doing this exercise, you are trying to keep nice and long in the side of the waist. This toe stays very close to the floor. And instead of thinking about trying to pulse backwards or upwards or do big bends, I want you to get the leg extended, squeeze your butt, and then just focus on squeezing the glute, getting that glute to plump up just a little bit. And when you force that contraction in the muscle, it will cause the leg to move slightly. So the thought is that contract in order to create movement, not move in order to contract.